Why did you decide to go clean? I mean, it's great for families and...
Well, about I was in my mid-30s, and a couple of things happened. One, I saw Dice Clay, Andrew Dice Clay special, and I thought, I was too dirty to be clean and too clean to be dirty. You know, I was raised blue collar, and I just had the language. The material was pretty much what I'm doing today. It was just spiced up with, and then my son was in 4th grade, and he called his teacher under his breath a couple of really nasty things. And we get called in, and I sat across from that teacher, this you know, somebody's mother, you know, somebody's wife, and I go, I'd love to look you in the eye and tell you I have no idea where my son heard that kind of language. But my wife and I are in the process of making some changes. We were getting pulled towards our faith. I was starting to attend church on the road, and I had met somebody, and anyway, when you hear it come out of your children's mouths, and I didn't exonerate him. I said, you know, because he goes, I didn't mean it. I go, so let me understand this so we're all on the same page. You have no control what comes out of your mouth. So if that was a 6'2", 250-pound man, you would have said the same thing. He goes, probably not. I go, see, so survival, you can't control your tongue. So anyway, I made him write out an apology, handwrite it, and then I said, I want your teacher to sign it after you read it to her. And then he came home and I said, how was it? He goes, it was awful. And I said, there you go. Owning what comes out of your mouth is awful. You know, but you have to own it. And then I realized, you know, that it would be hypocritical of me not to own what comes out of my mouth. Mm. So anyway, I just decided I'd pay my kids $0.25 for every foul word they heard come out of my mouth. And I got tired of handing out quarters.
Wow. Okay, that's a great story. I love it. Your kids have inspired you. And you talk a lot about family in your shows, specifically marriage. Your Happy Wife, Happy Life show is so popular. Why do we love laughing about just the trials and ups and downs of marriage?
I just think that it's, for me, what makes me laugh is truth, and then just kind of embellished. And there has to be a relationship, no matter what art you're doing. There has to be some kind of relationship to the viewer or the listener. And I think it's something we all relate to.
You know, you were referencing a change in your life, and you have a great story. I mean, the beginning of it hard, the end of it amazing. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, you know, you and your wife were kind of in a rough place because of an addiction.
Mildly. It was, we were in a rough place because we had a lot of baggage. I was addicted to cocaine and alcohol, but I quit doing that 9 months or 10 months into our marriage, almost a year. I quit, and then that just kind of put me on a road of recovery. I was not a nice man. I was an angry, bitter, jaded, cynical, foul-mouthed human being. Very condescending at home. My wife told me years later. She goes, "You probably weren't even aware of how many times you'd roll your eyes." I'd say things and I'd go like, you know, she'd say, you know, we should do, you know, like, oh, here we go again. And she said, it just made me feel so small, you know. And again, I didn't consciously do that. It just was who I was. So anyway, I just started a recovery program. I just went inside. I'm in the process of writing a book now called The Examined Life, based on Aristotle's quote, an unexamined life is not worth living. Mm. And it's just a lifelong process. You know, probably 7-8 years into a 12-step program, Tammy and I decided to get a divorce. Papers filled out, notarized by a notary. We didn't have anything to split up. We were broke. And at that point, I just told her, you can have everything, you know, we have. I just want you and the kids to be comfortable. And you deserve better than me. You do. Wow. I was so broken. But that's right where you need to be. You know, I've always said when the world breaks a man or a human being, they just toss him in the trash heap and they leave him there. When God breaks a man, it's for a reason, and build him back up. Mm. And you know, we were 10 minutes filing divorce papers from the courthouse, and Tammy changed her mind.
Why did she change her mind?
That's a good question. You know, it was interesting. And it was funny, we were sitting on the side of a road of an interstate having the conversation, and I told her, you're out. And she said, what do you mean? I go, you're out, Tammy. I'm trying, but I just could not stop the rage. Just couldn't. I mean, I'd go weeks, months, but then eventually I'd explode and break a bunch of things and scream and holler like a banshee. I have a phobia of dairy. If it's been in the refrigerator too long, I don't care if it's well or not. I get a point and I throw it out. So anyway, she finds this piece of cheese in the trash, and I open the new one, and it just starts. Why did you throw it away? I don't want it. And then she says, well, it's perfectly good. I go, fine, you eat it. And then it just escalates. And I end up on a chair yelling at her, I don't want it. Can you hear me? Are you deaf? I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. She falls to her knees and she's sobbing. God, it was 30 years ago. Anyway, put my son to bed that night, and he goes, Daddy, you win. I go, what do you mean? He goes, you yell, Mommy cries, you win.
Wow.
Went downstairs, I told Tammy, I said, I need help. She goes, you think? You think? And I went into therapy. Probably the next week, I went to a meeting that night. I remember him going, does anybody know a therapist? I have an issue with anger. And that kind of set me on the self-help journey. And then I went through New Age, Buddhism. I was seeking. I was examining my life.
Yeah, you're doing 12-step and they're talking about a higher power. You're an atheist, so you're kind of like, what do I find?
Well, that was it. I mean, and I said, look, if I'm making up a deity, that makes me delusional. I mean, I understand God exists or he doesn't. I don't believe he does. But I also opened my mind to crack. I say I moved from atheism to agnosticism. I knew I didn't know. And I did the prayers. They told me to pray. So I did the 3rd-step prayer, which is, I did this every day for years. Remove me from God, I use God. Remove me from the bondage of self so that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties so that victory over them, others may bear witness to thy strength, thy power, and thy way of life. God has answered those prayers because I go around the world now and to share about how my difficulties were taken away. And I also did the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Courage, change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Courage and wisdom. Eventually you learn courage and wisdom come from God. I had a beautiful therapist. It was interesting. She saw, immediately. I went there and 2 things. We tried to counsel together and we couldn't. We just bicker. Just bicker. Well, you said, and I said, so anyway, she separated us. But before she separated us, she asked Tammy, what do you want from our time together? And through her tears, Tammy said, I want him to be the way he was when we were dating. He was so much nicer. And the therapist kind of laughed and said, it'll never be the way it was when you were dating. That's an illusion. It's not real. This is real. And then I read, she put a book in my hands called Road Less Traveled. And Scott Peck, the author of the book, wrote that true love cannot begin in a relationship until conflict enters the relationship.
Wow.
Everything that leads up to that first moment of conflict is an illusion put there by God to keep the species going. And it's interesting because you look at the cultures today around the world and they chase the euphoria. They avoid the conflict. And I avoided conflict. Prior to meeting Tammy, every relationship I ever had, when conflict entered, I fled.
So what has facing conflict with Tammy given you now?
The strength of knowing that she'll be there.
Tell me, you're on all these steps toward God, but you're not there yet. So how did you get there? How did your life really begin to change?
Tammy was having an affair. And when I found out about it, she was in California. We were living in Arizona. And I'm not breaking any trust. She shared this on a video. I told her to get home. I found out, I called her, and said, get home. And I was getting self-righteous. And it was one of those moments where finally it's not me. Finally I got. And had she come home that night, which she was supposed to, I don't know if I'd be married today because I was loaded for bear. And I wrestled with God that night. Paced my room like a caged cat, waiting for her to get home. And every time I'd get self-righteous, that little voice would go off inside me. Really? Remember the time you stood on a stool in the kitchen? And you remember the time you smashed all the dishes? Remember the time, you know? And there dozens of them. So she didn't come home until 8 o'clock the next morning. And I picked her up at the airport and was exhausted. I put my arms around her, gave her a kiss on the cheek, and I said, she goes, "That's it?" I go, "Baby, we're a mess. We have 2 kids at home that need parents. If this is what you want, then you can have them. I'm not going to stand in your way. But if it's not what you want, we need to do a lot of work and get through this together." And I told her flat out, "I'll take 50% of the blame for this mess."
Wow.
And I said, if it goes to 51, 49, we're not going to get through it. She was involved with him for maybe 3 more months. The most gut-wrenching, heartbreaking period of my life.
Wow.
I remember being in Vegas, and she was in Jersey, and I knew she showed dogs. And I remember this specifically. I had 102 phone calls to her hotel room that week, all hang-ups, because I didn't want him to pick up the phone. But I tried to let her run its course. And in that summer that she was in Ohio with the kids and I was in Arizona, this man that I had met gave me Bible tapes. And I never opened any of them up until that summer. I had about 1.5 years of manila envelopes with Bible tapes in them. And the first one I opened up was Ecclesiastes. Just exhilarated me. Meaningless, meaningless, all is meaningless. And what I got out of that first tape, first sermon I ever really listened to, 45 minutes, life without God will have no meaning. Without meaning in your life, there's no purpose. Without purpose, you might as well off yourself. Suicide. And I just jumped, because that was my 8-year conclusion. I didn't know it. I didn't know there was a name for it, but I was a nihilist.
So what was the moment that you finally said, "God, yes, I surrender"?
Genesis 1:1. I was listening to all these tapes, and I was moving. I was really, something was stirring in me. And when I heard sermon on Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created, and I found out later Francis Schaeffer called it the most pregnant verse in the Bible. It gives birth to everything else. In the beginning, God. And I fell on my face. I called my friend Philip, and I said, "There's a God. I know in my heart and soul there's a God." He goes, "Yeah, I know. I've been trying to tell you for like 1.5 years. And I go, "Yeah, but I didn't know that." He goes, "What's your problem?" I go, "Blasphemy, cursing him, denying him." And I threw this tears. I said, "Why would he want me?" And he says, "Have you gotten to the cross?" I go, "What's that?" And he goes, "Oh, can't ruin the ending." You know. And I started listening to everything I could on Jesus and the cross. And the prodigal son, to this day, tears me up. The thought of the father running with open arms to the fallen one. And then the normal reaction by the good son. What does he get? And I realized at that point that Christianity is the only worldview that tells the strong among us to reach back and pick up the weak, pick up the human debris. And I was human debris.
What is different today about Jeff Allen?
The peace, the hope. Eternity doesn't begin, an eternal life does not begin when you die. It begins when you say yes to Jesus.
I know that there's somebody watching today that, a lot of people probably, that, maybe their marriage is on the rocks, maybe they're fighting an addiction, maybe they're angry. They don't know that God is maybe real. And they're not really sure how to move forward with their life or get out of the situation they find themselves in. What encouragement could you give that person?
Pray, whether you believe or not. Fake it, and seek. Jesus said, "Knock, I'll answer. Seek." So swallow your pride, get on your knees, say, "I can't do it anymore.